Good morning to you all. Thank you very much for joining me this morning for 11 Plus Education for Parents. The first thing I must do is to make sure that you can see me and hear me clearly. So I cannot see you or hear you, by the way. I can just see a list of names. And so what I'm going to do is pick the top one, and they're in alphabetical order, and enable you to speak so that you can confirm back to me. And the top name on my list at the moment here is Amreen. Amreen, can you hear me? If you're there, you're logged in.
Yes, I can. Hi.
Okay. All right. Hi, Amreen. Can you see me as well? Oh, no, you can't see me while you're speaking. All right. Okay. You can't see me when you're speaking. I'm going to disable you from speaking for a moment so you can see. All right. All right. So when you're not speaking, you could see me, right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to disable you now from speaking. Thank you very much for confirming. All right. So I'm going to assume that you all can see me and you all can hear me clearly. I'll repeat again. I cannot see you and I cannot hear you. I see a long list of people who have joined me this morning. I am Sir Tailor, and I'm going to do my utmost to share my expertise with you. And it is exactly what I call it. It is 11 Plus Education for Parents. So I'm going to now share my screen and begin a PowerPoint presentation. Now, in order that you don't get sick of hearing me speak, I'm going to punctuate it with some clips from YouTube. So these are all public resources, and you can find, millions of clips on YouTube, but I've picked out some which I think I should bring to your attention and which help to explain some of my points. So I'm going to share my screen now and start the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, now we do have people here from far and wide. Forgive me if I don't mention your part of the country, but we have people on the program and some here largely from West Middlesex, Berkshire, so Slough, Heston, Hounslow, Feltham, some from Bagshot, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Basingstoke, Maidenhead, High Wycombe, lots and lots of places, because the program that we offer caters for all parts of the country. And of course, the information I'm going to give you relates to every parent in the world. You'll understand that once we get into it. I'll also share some anecdotes because I've been doing this, that is teaching, for a long time and come across many parents in a position like yourself, and myself have actually been in your shoes. There will be a Q&A at the end. It is intended that my presentation would last about 2 hours. And then I've allowed about an hour for Q&A. And sometimes it takes less than an hour, but usually it takes a good bit longer than an hour for the Q&A. And I tend to stay and answer all questions that you might have. I would urge you to remain for the Q&A, not necessarily because you have a question that you want answered, but because other parents will ask questions that didn't occur to you, and you think, oh, I wish I'd asked that. I'm so glad they did. And actually, it's the same with teaching. When I do small group teaching, the children learn a vast amount from the questions and input of other children in the group. So within the small group, they actually have the opportunity to hear one another. And children do raise very interesting points that make the other children think. So I'm not saying you're like children, but the principle is the same, that you can get a lot of insight from the questions that other parents ask and the responses that I give. So I would encourage you to take advantage of the Q&A and stay as long as you can. Of course, you're a busy person and you have many other things to do, but if you can, it would be a good thing. I'll also mention that I'm recording this event. I record all my presentations, and at some point it's possible that all or part of it may appear perhaps on YouTube or on my website for others to refer to, because of course many people who really should be here and would benefit from this are not here for one reason and another. Now, I'm presenting to you in the role of an 11 plus expert, but also as a parent. Now, when I say 11 plus expert, I don't mean all aspects of 11 plus testing. I mean preparing children for the 11 plus tests. If you're going to ask about grammar schools and which one's better for your child and other processes to do with 11 plus like appeals and such, I can give you limited guidance on that. It's preparing children for the 11 plus test that I am an expert in. And if you have any question about that, I'll be very happy to share my experience with you. Okay, here we go. First thing then, you're here on a Sunday. Why? Well, you'll have your own reasons, or you would put them in your own way. But since I'm giving you a presentation, I'm trying to help you, I have to make some assumption about your reasons for being here. So I imagine that although you may think of it differently and you may word it differently, it's something like this: because you want to do your best for your children or your child. So I'm going to actually proceed on that basis. That's my assumption, that that's why you're here. And if you're here for some other reason, then I'm sorry, you are in the wrong place. But I imagine when you signed up for this, this is what you're interested in. You want to do your best for your child. Then that leads nicely into my next question, which is, why am I here? Well, I've kind of mentioned it already. I have some expertise in preparing children for 11 plus, and I'm going to share my insights with you so that you can make better choices for yourselves and your children. Simple as that. Now, you know, many times I find myself wishing, oh, I wish I knew a motor mechanic. Then they could tell me what my car really needs. Oh, I wish I knew a builder so they could give me a reasonable estimate for what this work is going to cost. Oh, I wish I knew somebody who was an expert in IT so they could help me to use my computer, my IT systems more efficiently. You know, we can't be experts in everything. We have our own areas where we are experts, but for the rest of it, we rely on the expertise of other people. And the difficulty with that is that we're in a world which is, well, let's say has cynical elements to it, where people are out for themselves and they don't really care about the consequences for other people, and they're quite happy to lie through their teeth to get your cash, and you're wary of that. So there's always a sense of, am I getting ripped off here? And that's why you think, if only I had a friend who I could trust to give me good guidance and good advice, then I wouldn't have to worry that I'm being ripped off. Well, that's me. I'm the friend when it comes to preparing children for 11 plus tests. So I'm being a friend to you. That's why I'm here. And when it comes to 11 plus, you should be wary, because for the most part, people are just after your cash. That is tutors, tuition companies, and they'll pack kids into a room which has nothing to do with educating your child. And a lot of people do make very poor choices. And one of the things that I see that really frustrates me or even upsets me is parents who really care about their children's flourishing. I see it all the time, but are doing things that are undermining their children's flourishing. Inadvertently, of course. They have the best of intentions and they really care. But because they don't have the expertise, they do things that actually undermine their child's flourishing. So they're having the opposite impact of the one that they want. And I see it. So I'm trying to do something about it. I'm here to share my expertise so that you can do more of the right things. So I'm saying to you, give yourself a chance. I'm going to share some important insights. Some of them might sting at first. Now, what I mean by that is you might not like the things or some of the things that I say. And usually when you don't like some of the things I say, it's because they are in conflict with something that you already thought you knew or something that you believed. And I may be kind of at odds with that. I might be contradicting something. And then, of course, none of us likes that. So I do understand, but I ask, please just hear me out and reflect a little bit. And because all this is about trying to help you to help your child to flourish. Give it some time, think about it. And if there's something I say that doesn't make sense to you, save it for the Q&A. Then put me on the spot. Okay, now, we all have feelings. You have feelings, I have feelings, your child has feelings. But we are not our feelings. You are not your feelings. You may have feelings about some of the things that I say today. For example, you are not those feelings. I'm going to play a short video clip from YouTube about this.
It's also important to remember that you are not your feelings. One of the most important things that you can learn from this book, and more importantly for life, is that you are not your feelings. Your feelings are there to give you an example of how you could react, but that doesn't mean you have to act in that way. So remember, you do not have to act on your feelings. When you understand that your feelings are just suggestions for how you could act in a situation and not what you have to do, you'll become unstoppable.
Now, I'm saying this, and I've shown you that clip because I would like you to respond positively to the insights that I share with you. But since I've played that, you know, that is a powerful idea that you can use in order to support your child in doing the right things. Point out to them that, yes, they do have feelings and it's normal to have feelings. Whatever their feelings are, it's normal to have those feelings. But point out to them that those feelings are just events taking place inside their bodies. They are not their feelings. They can recognize, be aware of, acknowledge their feelings, but they don't necessarily have to react with those feelings. So I'm making a request to you. Why should you heed me even if you don't like what I say? Or at least hear me out. Well, a couple of important things. One, I am motivated to educate and not by profit. For example, we, that is Sir Tailor, the company, we teach in small groups because this is the most effective for learning, but very bad for making profits. Something which you may not be aware of, I think most people are not aware of, is that Sir Tailor, the company, does not run for profit. We do not run for profit. We try to break even, and we often succeed. And I wish I could say we always succeed, but we don't. I could easily make a profit. I'll tell you how. I just pack in a dozen kids into my room. They'll suddenly be making lots of profit. And that's exactly what most tutoring companies do. They'll pack in a dozen or more children into a room, and then they pretend that they're educating your child. They are not. Take it from me. No, I keep to the small group because it's the most powerful learning format. It's more powerful than one-to-one for children at this age. And that's why I do it, because it's about education. So I can tell you what you actually need to know, because it's all about education. So I think that if I'm going to be telling you all these things, then I should tell you a little bit about me so you understand where this is all coming from, because this is all me. Everything I say in this presentation is representative of me, my opinions, my point of view, my expertise. So you should know a little about me. My name is actually Sudhir. Sudhir, and Tailor is actually my surname. I was born in Kenya, and I went from Kenya to India when I was a very young child, and then came to this country from India. So I am an immigrant from India. Now, this is for my own interest. You have the facility to kind of participate by raising your hand. Okay, so you have a button, I think, where you can raise your hand. If you are an immigrant, i.e. you were not born in this country, if you are an immigrant, would you please raise your hand? I just want to get an idea about the people present. Oh, I see lots of hands going up. Okay, yep, I think at the moment it's just over half of those present were not born in this country. Okay, so there are a lot of us, you know, a lot of immigrants. Okay, I'm going to lower all hands now. And I am one. I am dad to 2 girls. Now, I don't really know why, but every time I mention that, I feel compelled to kind of prove it. There they are. Okay, there's the evidence. Those are my girls. Kavita on the left is 23 later this year, and she's at York University. And Nilam on the right is 26, and she is a journalist currently working for The Guardian. So, who am I? I am an immigrant. I am a dad, and I am a teacher and a trainer, and I have been since 1985. You can do the arithmetic. I've been teaching my own 11 plus course since 2001. So I'm in my 20th year of that now. And I estimate, I've never kept count, but I estimate that I have personally taught between 10,000 and 20,000 people over 35 years. And not least, I try to do my bit to make the world a better place for all of us and our children. So that is who I am in the nutshell. So that's where what I tell you is coming from. So since I'm not driven by profit, what am I driven by? I have a vision. This is my vision: to empower people, i.e. to make people more powerful by enhancing, meaning making stronger, their love of and skills in learning and reasoning. In essence, thinking. I believe in the power of education to improve the world and people's lives. Essentially, I am a teacher at heart. I believe in the power of education to make the world better. Okay, now, I don't doubt you, but I'm just making a point. Are you serious about doing your best for your child? The very fact that you are here answers that question, that you are serious about it. But I am making a point here. Some of you may have heard of Carl Sagan. He passed away, I think, in the 90s, and he was a renowned cosmologist. And he was, in his lifetime, the leading authority on the search for extraterrestrial life. He wrote books, he made TV series, and so on. He was very sought after for his opinion on anything to do with extraterrestrial. So he was asked by a journalist during an interview, so Carl, what do you think? Are we alone in the universe, or is there life out there? And Carl Sagan replied in the only way that a scientist would, a thinking person, that the evidence isn't in, meaning we cannot say for sure one way or the other. There is the possibility of life out there, but we have not found any evidence of it yet. So the jury's out. That was the essence of his answer. I'm not quoting him. But he's essentially saying we don't know one way or the other. But of course, the journalist is after some sort of a headline. So she pressed him and said, but what does your gut tell you? She just wanted him to commit. And this was Carl Sagan's response. But I try not to think with my gut. If I'm serious about understanding the world, thinking with anything other or anything besides my brain, as tempting as that might be, is likely to get me into trouble. So what I'm saying to you is take a leaf out of Carl Sagan's book. If you're serious about doing your best for your child, you have to put your gut to one side and pay attention to the facts, if you like, the things that make sense. Okay, which requires learning, and learning requires mental work. This is for everybody, not just your child, for you and me and everybody else. Learning requires mental work. What is learning? Learning is pathways in the brain. Creating new learning means new pathways in the brain, new connections. It requires us to think new thoughts and repeat new thoughts in order to establish new pathways and new connections in the brain. That's what learning is. Some new thoughts can be in conflict with some old thoughts, so there can be some resistance there. And of course, the way to resolve those conflicts is through reflection, logical thought. Okay, now this presentation is in 4 sections, and they're in order of importance, starting with the most important, which is mind management. Now, the size of the text is, if you like, proportional to the importance of that aspect to your child's flourishing, which is, I am assuming, what we are here for. Then after that, mindset is the next most important thing. I'll be explaining what each of these is. Then there's perspective. And then least important, although still important, otherwise I wouldn't bother to mention it, least important by far, 11 plus stuff. So you can see, by far the most important thing for your child's flourishing is mind management, then mindset, then perspective, and then a very, very much smaller 11 plus stuff. And I'll be talking about these things in that order. Effective mind management, that is yours and your child's, is critical to your child's flourishing. What I'm saying there is that it's not just your child's mind management, which is important for their flourishing, it's your mind management too. Okay, so sometimes we all do the wrong thing. It's just something about being a person. So I have a question for you. I'd like you to put your mind to it. You're not going to have to confess, by the way, so you needn't be embarrassed. And it would be good if you take part, because then you'll be able to engage more with the actual issue, the point. What are some of the things that you do that you know you should not do, or things you avoid doing that you know you should do? I'd like you to put your mind to that and give it a little bit of thought. It can be big things, small things, you know, it can be trivial. It doesn't matter as long as you think of something. I can think of lots of things that for myself, some of the things that I do that I know I should not do. Let's think. I eat excessively sometimes. Sometimes I'm a bit partial to chocolate oranges, especially the dark chocolate ones. So I overindulge in those sometimes. Something that I avoid doing that I know I should do is I'm avoiding exercise at the moment, even though the gym has reopened. Sometimes when I go into a shop, I'm getting much closer than 2 meters to people. So these are some examples that I have of things that I do that I know I should not, or things that I avoid doing. Now, just to see that anybody out there is with me and is still alive, can you please raise your hand if you've thought of something that you do that you know you should not do, or things that you avoid doing that you know you should do? Just raise your hand so I have an indication. That's great. Okay, lots of hands going up. I'm glad to see you're still with me. Lovely. Thank you very much. All right, good. All right. So I'm going to now lower all hands and make my point. That's quite an easy question, you know, this one, question 1, but question 2 is a little harder. Why is it that you sometimes don't do what you know is the sensible thing to do. In other words, why do you avoid doing those things that you know you should do? Why do you do those things that you know you should not do? I.e., why is it you sometimes don't do the thing that is sensible and you know it? Even as you do it, even as you eat that sixth biscuit, you think, this is going to be really bad. I'm going to feel bad about myself afterwards. Even as you do it, you know it's not the sensible thing to do, and yet you go ahead and do it. Well, unfortunately, you can't answer me, but I have asked the same question in live seminars, seminars, um, when we were allowed to hold them. And this is the answer that I got. There are lots of them. One of them is that those things which are not sensible, like eating unhealthy food, sugary food, fatty food, oily food, it's more pleasant, it's more appetizing than the healthier foods, generally speaking. So it's more satisfying in that sense and more pleasant in that sense. Very often, the sensible thing is more difficult to do. It requires more willpower, more motivation. And the thing that is not sensible is often easier to do. So you're less resistant to it. Sometimes when it comes to decisions, we know what is more sensible, but sometimes we go with peer pressure because people around us are doing something else or advocating something else. So you go against your own better judgment and go along with someone else's advice or guidance or opinion, peer pressure. These are some of the reasons why we don't do the thing that we know is the sensible thing to do. Okay, and we all do this, by the way. So now, third question. Who is your biggest enemy? All right. Now, hands up if you want to say it's you yourself. Hands up if you think the answer to question 3 is you yourself. Who is your biggest enemy? Well, only one hand has gone up. 2. All right. 3. All right. Okay. Now we're cooking. Look, the only reason I wanted you to put your hands up for this, and I'm again going to lower hands, is so that I could contradict you. I'm so sorry. But who is your biggest enemy? Look, you need not beat yourself up and say, oh, it's me, I'm so bad, I just not in control of myself, and I don't know why I do these things, and I know they're really bad for me and my family. Don't beat yourself up, because it isn't you. You are not your biggest enemy. So that's the good news. It's not you, it's your chimp, your own chimp. Okay, now I'd like to see a show of hands of any, if you know what the chimp is. What is your chimp? Does anybody raise your hand if you're aware of your chimp, please? Okay, oh, a couple of hands already. Come on, think. Are you aware of the chimp? What am I talking about? Your own chimp. Anybody who's been to a presentation before or who's had a child go through my 11 Plus program should know quite well. There are a good number of you who are aware of it. I'm really glad to see. But I have to say that the majority of you are not aware of the chimp, or at least your hands are not raised. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Now I'm going to lower hands. I've just lowered all hands. So the good news is you're not the bad guy here who's making all those poor choices. It's your chimp. But I have some bad news, and it is this, that if you're not aware of your chimp, then you're in trouble. Because if you're not aware of your chimp, you can't manage it. Okay? So what is this chimp? Well, it's not a pet animal that you keep in your house. It's actually parts of your brain. So the chimp lives in your head, but is not you. Earlier, I showed you the video clip. It says that your feelings are not you. Well, that applies equally to the chimp. The chimp is inside your head. It's parts of your brain, but it is not you. So that fool that makes those poor choices on your behalf, good news. It's not you making those poor choices. It is the chimp. Now, you're not off the hook completely, by the way, but here's an introduction to what I'm talking about.
There are three core tenets to the book. You have a chimp and a human in your head, and they want very distinct things. Your human is a simplified representation of your prefrontal cortex and some other parts of your brain that handle long-term thinking, delayed gratification, emotion control, consideration, and ethics. You also have a chimp in your brain. This is the limbic system and all the older parts of your brain, the parts of your brain that we would have had more in common with a chimp. Steve Peters separates out these parts of the brain and says that they want completely distinct things. They have entirely different motivations, and if you don't understand this and fail to put them in their appropriate places, then you will be forever in conflict within your own mind. This book is extremely simple. It has no flowery words or high concept ideas. It's plain and simple, to the point. You've got two dudes in your head, a chimp and a human. They are in conflict. You need to sort out that conflict if you want to have a happy, healthy, long life. And there is great, great power in this simplicity. Anytime you find yourself being overly emotional, reactive, sad, scared, you have to realize that your chimp is acting up. Anytime you feel hurt or jealous, it is the chimp that is in control. Realize that you are not your chimp. The chimp is like a child that you must always look after and that will never grow up. It will always remain the chimp, and you must accept it as it is. Don't control and hate the chimp. Manage and love the chimp. This requires you to listen and give it what it needs. So if the chimp is frightened, you don't just go, shut up, or ignore it, or berate it, or anything like that. You don't ignore your emotions. You don't ignore what your body is telling you. Instead, you listen, and then you find the most logical, rational solution to the problem. You must be a problem solver. And if you don't find solutions that appease the chimp and make the human happy, you will be forever miserable. If you don't make the chimp happy, if you ignore it or try to trick it, then it will take over. Your chimp needs sex, it needs a tribe, it needs love and security, and it needs territory. And you have to give it these things, amongst other things, to avoid internal conflict. You must satisfy its needs, keeping check on it like you would with a small, scared child. If you do this, then it will behave. By separating out the parts of your brain and giving them identities, it allows you to distance yourself from the more base, reactive parts of your mind and thereby love yourself more. Where once you might say, why the hell do I always get so angry over such small, silly things? I'm such a goddamn loser. You now say, why does this get your back up, and how can we make sure this happens less in the future? What do you need, Jim? I mean, you might or might not say it in a weird, fake American accent. This acceptance of all aspects of yourself is pure liberation. The vast majority of people are completely ruled by their chimps, and they don't even realize it. This makes them act in an angry, petty, possessive, egotistical way. If you keep an awareness of this, then when people act out, it allows you to have more compassion, empathy, and patience with them. You can say, hang on a second, this person is clearly ruled by their chimp. Sure, they may be doing me wrong, but far better to have some slight I can bounce back from in 3 seconds than to have an unruly chimp who is on the clock 24/7 causing mayhem and terror and destroying one's life.
Okay, so that was a brief introduction to the chimp. I'm not going to tell you more about the chimp, but if you are unfamiliar with your chimp, it is probably making some of your important decisions and choices which affect not only you, but your family. Now, the book that the narrator was referring to is this book. It's called The Chimp Paradox and written by Professor Steve Peters. I'll mention the book again later on, but it is issued, I issue it to the parents of every child who is subscribed to the 11 Plus program, because it's so important. mind management is the most important aspect of your child's flourishing. And to try and get your child to flourish, but without giving a great deal of attention to mind management, doesn't make sense. A lot of parents get it back to front. This is one of the frustrating things that I see. Parents focus so much on 11 plus stuff, verbal reasoning, this book, that math, that mock exam, etc., etc., etc. And they're forgetting about the most important things. All of those things are important, practice papers, mock tests, and so on. But unless you've got the mind management, mindset, and perspective right, it's all a bit futile. So it begins with mind management. And that's why education for parents has to come before education for the children. Otherwise, parents are doing the wrong thing without realizing it. And if you're not aware of your chimp might be making some important choices and decisions that affect not just you, but your child too. I feel like it's my duty just to bring these things to your attention, to empower you, in other words.
There are three.
I didn't mean to play that again, sorry. So who's in charge? I mean, in your life, your decisions. Is it you or is it your chimp? Well, we like to think it's us, you know? We care about the people in our lives and we try to do things which are right for them and of course for ourselves. That's the way we like to picture ourselves. And then sometimes we know full well that it's that little guy there, the chimp, that's in charge. But how do you know? Because sometimes we think we're the ones in charge and we're not aware that is the chimp. So I'm going to just sum it up in a very brief way how you can tell. Okay, because it is really important. How can you recognize when your chimp is in charge? Well, here it is. Nice little summary. You can take a screenshot if you like. Who's in charge, you or your chimp? So on the left is good, green is good, red is bad. You, this is you, the human being, the sensible person with the higher motives. Good ways to make decisions are when you ask questions like, why is this important? So you're engaging your thinking side, the logical side. What are the facts? You're interested in facts as opposed to feelings. What are the facts? Now, of course, we're surrounded by facts. You could say we're overwhelmed by facts. So then the human asks, but which facts matter the most? Because people will throw facts at you till you get saturated and then you can no longer decide which ones are the important ones. But the human does that. Which facts are the important ones? Which facts matter the most? Which decision makes the best logical sense? These are human ways of thinking, sensible ways, if you like, of making important decisions. And on the right is the chimp, bad ways to make decisions. What are others doing? i.e. looking around. How will it make me look? Concern for your status or how you look to others. What will people think? What do my urges say? So the urges thing is back to Carl Sagan. Gut feelings. Okay, so whenever the thought runs through your head, what are others doing? How will it make me look? What will people think? What will people say? What do my urges say? What does my gut say? That's the chimp. And if your decision is heavily influenced by those thoughts, then you've got to step back and try and use the green questions. The left side, the human way of making choices. This is it. This is how you make important decisions and choices if it's you that's making those. Okay, now we come to goals. Now, this works best if you actually think of a goal that you have. It doesn't have to be earth-shattering. It can be a small goal, but just think of something. We all have goals, you know, things we would like to achieve. So please think of something and if you would now bring something to mind, which is a goal of yours, please raise your hand when you have one. Okay, so think of a goal. I'm not going to ask you to share it, of course, it's private. So, but think of one. Okay, so you've got something in your head. All right, the ball's rolling now. Lots of people have a goal in head. It's your goal, it's private. I'm not going to ask you about it. Okay, it's your goal, but we all have goals. Just bring one to mind. Thank you very much, everybody, for doing that. Okay, now I'm going to lower hands. It doesn't matter what your goal is, okay, as long as you've got one in your head, a goal of yours, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about goals now. Presumably, achieving your goals is success. Now, some of you might be thinking, right, well, if I could get my son, my daughter into a grammar school, now that would be a worthy goal, right? And I think, I'm an expert in 11 plus preparation. You are parents who are thinking of 11 plus for your child, grammar school perhaps for your child. So that does seem like a sensible goal. Or, if you already have a child in a grammar school, like for example, if you have one son already in Queen Elizabeth School in Barnet, and it would be fantastic if your next son could go to the same school, because that makes school runs very convenient. So you're getting your child into a particular grammar school, that surely is success, isn't it? Well, I hate to break it to you, but you're wrong on both counts. Neither of those is a sensible goal. Please stay with me, don't run away, because I am going to explain why I'm saying this. But you know what? This is exactly the kind of thing at which the chimp feels indignant and says, how dare you, Sir Tailor? Whereas the human, the thinking part inside your brain, is thinking, I wonder why he's saying that. How interesting. Okay? Right. Now, Rosie, I've just put that on the screen to remind me to recount to you an anecdote. This is a true story of an experience that I had in my first year of teaching 11 plus. So I am talking about 2001. I used to teach a group. I used to teach several groups, but one of them was on a Sunday morning in Langley Pavilion. Those in Langley will be familiar with it. And I had about 8 or 9 children in that group. And there were 2 girls who were kind of family friends, school friends, and they used to always come together. And they did the program, the course. And at that time, the exam used to take place in the middle of November. It's much sooner now. It's like 2 months sooner normally. Of course, this year it's been pushed back because of COVID. But the point is, they did their exam in November. And at that time, I lived in Slough. And so I lived locally. And I used to do my shop at a co-op that used to be on the site which is now Sainsbury on the Bath Road. Or is it the London Road? Anyways, the A4. And I was doing my weekly shop, might have been December, might have been January, after these girls would have sat their exam. And as I was pushing my trolley around co-op, I saw Rosie and her family. They were shopping. And when they saw me, they came over. They obviously were very pleased and happy. And I thought, oh, how nice to see them. And they came and the father shook my hand and he said, thank you very much, Sir Tailor. Rosie did great in her 11 plus and she's likely to go to, and I don't remember which school, but at the time it was either Slough Grammar School or Langley Grammar School. And I was really pleased to see how much joy they had got from this success, I say in inverted commas. And then I carried on shopping. And at the end of the aisle, I saw Rosie's friend, whose name I cannot remember, but her friend and their family, who also were doing their weekly shop. And I could see from where I was that they were not happy. And to me, the father, it looked like he'd gone grey. And actually his complexion too seemed quite grey. And there were no smiles. And it was as if I thought perhaps there'd been a death in the family, because literally that is how the family appeared. It was like their heads were hung down and there was no joy in there. It's like their eyes were dead. And I went up and I said, "Oh, hello, how are you? Is everything okay?" And they said, no, their daughter did not pass the 11 plus. And their reaction to it was as if there had been a death in the family, as if that was the end of their life. It was as if there's no coming back from that. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And I said to myself then and there, this is so ridiculous. I have to do whatever I can to spare the children from that. Imagine from the child's point of view, how much she was stigmatized by her parents' reaction. She must feel as if she was a failure, and she was not. But the reaction of her parents and maybe many others around her was that she was. And that stays with the child for life. So this is an example, a prime example of one of the things that parents do, that they want to do the best for their child, but they end up really undermining their child. And this is a prime example of it, that ridiculous reaction to a score in a test. So that's my Rosie story, and I'm sharing it with you to spare your child from a similar kind of experience and fate, which is not just for that week or that year. It stays with the child for life, that kind of thing. So I've just empowered you to help your child avoid getting into that position. Anyway, what is success then? So if it's not your child getting into a grammar school or into a particular grammar school, what is success? Well, it depends who you talk to. This guy said, your health is your real wealth. Well, you know, before COVID, a lot of people lost sight of that. But I think in the new world, a lot of people actually understand this. Or is it happiness? Two things prevent us from happiness. One, living in the past, and two, observing others. I think there's an awful lot of truth in that. Okay, so success. Now, I'm going to play another YouTube clip about this topic.
The book is also great because it talks about how to set effective goals. Because a lot of the time, if you set a goal and don't reach it, you'll feel disappointed with yourself. But there's a way you can avoid this disappointment, and that's by setting a goal that isn't controlled by external factors. For example, you could set a goal of getting a job, but there's no guarantee you're going to get it. However, what if you change your goals to reading up on the job, learning interview techniques, and how to act your power? If you don't get the job, you can still be happy because you've achieved your goals and maximize your chance of getting it.
Okay. So achieving our goals is success, but what is a sensible goal to set in the first place? Well, what this clip said is that setting the goal of getting a particular job is not a sensible goal. That is not a sensible goal. Now, you might think, yes, it is, and it is in my control whether I get the job or not. I have to say, no, I don't agree with you. If you believe that getting a particular job is in your control, then there's a bit you're missing. You may be a fantastic candidate. You may have the best experience for doing that job. You may have a superb track record and a wonderful professional CV that really sells you. You may dress for the occasion according to best practice. You may have wonderful interview techniques. You know, all these things are in your control. That is true. And you may be wonderful in interview, but none of that, it guarantees that you're going to get the job. And you may think, but of course it does. No, it does not, because you're not the one making the decision. Normally there's a panel, a group of people who are interviewing you, and it is they who make the decision. And they are human beings. And one person on that panel who is influential in the decision may just have something in their own lives that influence their decision. And it may be something about you that reminded them of something else in their life, or a bad experience that they had, or a previous employee, and you reminded them at a subconscious level, not on a conscious level, on a subconscious level, that they were not even aware of. That affects their decision. We're all susceptible to this kind of thing. And then you don't get the job. So you may think you have control over it, but you do not. Getting a particular job cannot be your measure of success. That cannot be a sensible goal. So in this context of getting a job, what is a sensible goal? Well, it's all the things I said. Have apply for a job that you're well qualified for, get a brilliant CV, dress for the part, research the company, the job, practice good interview techniques, anticipate what kind of questions they might ask you and be ready with good answers to them, and all of that good stuff. So good goals, as it says on the left, reading up on the job, the company, learning interview techniques, how to act the part, have a wonderful CV, make sure you've got great referees, and all of that is in your control. But getting the job is not in your control. And there is an important distinction. So sensible goals, in essence, are goals that are within your control. The things that are within your control are sensible goals. And the things that are not in your control are not sensible goals. In the context of 11 plus, why isn't it a sensible goal that your child gets to a grammar school? Why isn't it a sensible goal that your child gets into a particular grammar school or even passes the 11 plus? Well, the reason is quite simple, because it's not in their control. It is quite unreasonable to set passing the 11 plus as a goal for your child, because passing is not in their hands. Now you might be thinking, yes, it is. Yes, it is. No, Sir Tailor, you're the 11 plus tuition expert. Surely it's in your hands. No, it is not. I can teach, your child can study, they can learn, you can support, etc. And they turn up on the day, having done all the preparation that they could have done. And then they could quite easily flunk it. There are lots of reasons why a child may not pass or get a qualifying score in the 11 plus, which are beyond their control. So passing the 11 plus is not in the child's control, and therefore it is not a sensible goal to set. And it should never be the measure of your success or my success or the child's success, because it is beyond their control. And if you make passing a measure of their success, you are putting your child at great risk of being stigmatized as a failure, and not just that week, but for the rest of their lives. So this was all about what are sensible goals. So how to measure success then, if it's none of these things? Well, listen to this guy, very wise. This is Professor Steve Peters. He was doctor at the time when he wrote it, but he's the author of the Chimp Paradox. Measure success in life by effort and doing your best. Then it's in your hands to succeed and be proud of yourself. Think about that. It means that measure your success according to the things which are within your control, which is your own effort. If you make your best effort at a thing, that is success. Because the outcomes are influenced or affected by many other things which are not in your control. And to believe that those external things are in your control is a bit deluded. You'd have to kind of think, well, wait a minute, I'm kind of pretending or trying to have control of things that are actually beyond my control. And that's a little dodgy. Okay, so that's mind management. Now we come to the second most important thing, second only to mind management, and that is mind mindset. Now, I'd like to see a show of hands, please, people who have heard of a growth mindset or know what that is. Please raise your hand if you know what a growth mindset is. Okay, I'm not going to preempt it because I've got a really nice clip from YouTube. That's a small number of hands. I'd say about a quarter or a fifth of the people here know what a growth mindset is. And I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. I'm going to lower all hands now. I'm so glad you're here because it's such an important thing for you as a parent to be aware of. And I'm so pleased to be the person to be able to help you with it. Your mindset can help or hinder you in striving towards your potential and your child in striving towards their potential. So what I'm saying here is that your mindset, you, the mum, the dad, your mindset affects not only you, but again, it affects your son or your daughter. Same as mind management, same principle. But what is this then? Right. There are two. There's the growth and the fixed mindset. You can guess which is the good one. I'm not going to preempt it. I'm going to play this clip and let you take it in.
Do you have a growth mindset? How do you think of intelligence? Do you think you're born with a certain level of intelligence that you can't change much? Or do you think it's something you can work on to develop and grow? Many students think that their level of intelligence is fixed, that they can't do much to change it. This can lead them to feeling that they just aren't smart enough to succeed, especially when courses get more challenging. But what if you knew that no matter who you are, through effort and effective strategies, you can develop your level of intelligence? According to Stanford University psychologist Carol Dweck, how we think about our brains actually affects how well we learn. Dweck says that people generally think with one of two different mindsets, a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. People with a fixed mindset believe that their intelligence is fixed at birth and they can't do much to change it. People with a growth mindset believe that their talents, abilities, and intelligence can be developed in different ways. And you may feel like you have a fixed mindset in some ways and a growth mindset in others. For example, you may think with a fixed mindset that you're just not a math person, but you may adopt a growth mindset with writing, music, sports, or another discipline. In fact, scientists who study the brain have found that the brain is like a muscle. It changes and grows in response to what we do. The harder we work using helpful strategies and the more challenges we face, the stronger and smarter the brain becomes. This is because the brain is made up of cells called neurons, which are connected to each other. As we learn, the number of connections between our neurons also grows. As we continue to exercise our brains, the connections between our neurons grow as well. These new and stronger connections help to make us smarter. Scientists call this concept neuroplasticity. Research shows that students who adopt a growth mindset, who believe that their brains can grow and develop through effort and challenges, actually do better in school. For these students, the goal is not to prove what they already know, but rather to learn and grow. Students with a growth mindset view challenges and mistakes not as proof that they aren't smart enough, but as opportunities to become smarter. The good news is that you can develop a growth mindset. You've taken the first step by learning about some of the science that shows you can grow your brain. The next step is to consider your mindset. If you have some areas in which you think you aren't smart, challenge yourself to learn and grow. Why should you bother? Because if you learn to develop your mindset, you'll persist longer with problems. You'll take on harder challenges and stretch your mental muscle more. You won't be as affected by setbacks, and in the end, you'll learn more. And the effects of changing your mindset can stick with you for years, since you're training your brain to think in a new way.
So that's a nice introduction to mindset, and educational establishments are all over it. You can barely go into any primary or secondary school without seeing some display about growth mindset and how to exercise it. Now, because mindset is so important for a person's flourishing, um, it is part of parents' education. And I issue this book also to the parents of every child who signs up for the 11 plus course. It's really important. The insights in there. It's called Mindset, and it's written by Professor Carol Dweck, who was mentioned in that video. She's going to appear in the next video too. This is a, please don't blink because you'll miss something.
So check this out. Carol Dweck and her colleagues wanted to look into the impacts that praise had on children's development. So what they did is they took over 400 fifth grade students from all across the nation, and they did a really simple yet interesting study. Here's how it went down. They gave all the kids a really easy nonverbal IQ test. There were 10 questions, and at the end of the test, they praised all the children in one of two ways. The first group was praised for their intelligence. So they said, wow, great job. You must be really smart at this. Now the second group was praised for their effort. So they said, wow, great job. You must have worked really hard at this. Now this is a really subtle difference, but the impact it had is incredible. So after praising the kids and getting them divided up into the two groups, they gave them all an option for their next test. The first option was, hey, this next test is going to be a little bit harder, but it's going to be a great opportunity to learn and grow. Now, the second option was, this next test will be similar to the first, and you will surely do well on it. Now, the interesting thing is, out of the group that was praised for their intelligence, 67% of them chose the easier option, while 92% of the kids who were praised for their effort chose the harder test. This is unbelievable to think about, how just the subtle difference in the way that they were praised had such an impact. Carol Dweck explains why this happens.
The child or adult hears, oh, you think I'm brilliant and talented. That's why you admire me. That's why you value me. I better not do anything that will disprove this evaluation. As a result, they enter a fixed mindset, they play it safe in the future, and they limit the growth of their talents. Whereas focusing on the strategies they use, the way they're stretching themselves and taking on hard tasks, the intense practice they're doing, those are the kinds of things that say to a child or an older athlete, it's about the process of growth. As a result, they don't feel, oh, if I make a mistake, you won't think I'm talented. They think, oh, if I don't take on hard things and stick to them, I'm not going to grow.
Next, Dweck and her colleagues gave all the kids a really difficult test. It was one that they would surely fail, but they wanted to look at how the different kids attacked this challenge. Dweck noticed that the group that was praised for effort worked harder, longer, and actually enjoyed this test more than the group that was praised for their intelligence. This group got really frustrated with this test and had the tendency to give up early. After this artificially induced failure round, all of the kids were given a third and final test. Now this test was the same level of difficulty as the first one, but check out the results. The group that was praised for their intelligence actually did worse on this test than the first one. Their average score actually dropped by 20%, while the group that was praised for their effort did significantly better, raising their average score by nearly 30%. This is a 50% difference in performance that was caused by a few subtle differences in the way that they were praised. This study shows how praise can either make or break a child's development. I mean, we all do it. We all want to be positive with the children we work with, so teachers, coaches, parents,
are always looking for ways to support their kids and tend to praise them quite a bit. So we need to look at research like this and realize, okay, praise is a good thing and there's nothing wrong with being positive, but we need to be very careful about praising someone's intelligence or abilities and focus more on the process and the effort that they put.
Okay. Now there's more to it, and that's why I issued the book, so that you can internalize it in your own time. Excuse me. But the essence of it is that, you know, as parents, we try to praise our children and encourage them and sort of big them up. And I did the same when my daughters were little. I remember saying, "Oh, aren't you a clever girl? Well done for getting this," or what have you. And I look back now and I think, oh, I wish I'd known then what I know now. I wish I'd actually read Mindset. It wasn't out at that time. But the essence of it is, if you praise your child for being intelligent or clever, or big them up for their intelligence or their talent or their abilities, or in addition to that, outcomes, meaning scores or results or winning the trophy and all of that, then that is actually going to encourage a fixed mindset. Whereas if you praise processes and effort, i.e. doing their best, doing the right things in the right way at the right time and doing their best, then that encourages a growth mindset. So the parents who are always looking at scores, you know, when in the course, when some parents are just simply interested in the scores, they're not listening to the feedback, the guidance that they're getting. They're just looking at the scores, and then they make a face in front of their child based upon a score, a number that they saw. That parent has a fixed mindset, and that parent is actually causing their child to have a fixed mindset. And I'm empowering you to not be that parent. Okay, so that is mindset. So mind management and mindset are so important that parents have homework to do. Okay, these two books are, I believe, compulsory reading for every parent. So you are issued with those. The third thing then is a realistic perspective. A lot of parents, they don't have a realistic perspective. I've kind of alluded to this already much earlier in the presentation. But a realistic perspective on your part allows you to apply your energies where they really count for your child. Now, earlier, I did allude to this because what I said is that 11 plus stuff, many parents throw a lot of attention, effort, and emotion and cash at 11 plus stuff, books, practice papers, mock tests, and all of that. But those, as important as they are so much less important than mindset and mind management. You can really leverage everybody else's efforts if you yourself practice good mind management and mindset and nurture those things in your child. This is the perspective that I'm talking about. Putting your energies where they really count for your child. Right, which brings me to another question. Right, now, obviously you're not going to answer it to me, but you should think to yourself, who's your greatest teacher? Now, most people are wise to this, and sometimes people think of a teacher they had at school, sometimes people think of their parents, or some other person, but most people would say that they are their own greatest teacher. Okay, I'm just making a point here by asking a few questions. I just want you to think. What knowledge, beliefs, and abilities were you born? Oh gosh, you're born with. Sorry, I just noticed a typo. It should say, were you born with? Apologies for the typo. What knowledge, beliefs, and abilities were you born with? Well, think back. Obviously, you don't remember, but you've seen babies, and You can use your imagination. What knowledge, beliefs, and abilities were you born with? Well, I would say you were born with zero knowledge, zero beliefs, but some abilities. One of them being the ability to cry. That's your main means of communication when you're born. And then it's up to mum, usually, sometimes dad, to figure out, what does this mean? Is he hungry? Does he have a tummy ache? Is he too hot? Is he too cold? Has he soiled his nappy? What is it? You don't know. So, yes, the ability to cry, the ability to eat, and the other end. But the most important ability that we're all born with is the ability to learn. We have these fantastic brains which don't have any knowledge and beliefs when we're born, but they do have the ability to learn. Okay, now think about this. You might be thinking, yes, school, I've got to get my child into a good school. They must go to a good university. This. Well, I am going to contradict you if that's what you think. Look, your child, you yourself were born with no knowledge and beliefs. But by the time you went to nursery, or if you went to nursery or to infants, you would have been maybe 4 to 5 years old. And in that time, not only have you learned to speak, and you might have also started to learn to read at home, and you would have learned many skills, of course, one of them being how to walk and run. You'd be very skillful at playing certain games, playing toys, and you have a lot of knowledge that you've picked up from your environment. Very importantly, you will have picked up from the people around you, the people you spend most time with, the people who are most influential to you, which usually is the parents. You will have picked up their mind management. The way they manage their minds will seem like that's the norm for you. And their mindset, whether it's growth or fixed in certain situations, you will have picked that up. And more than that too, your whole worldview has been shaped by your home, your household, your place in the world, the way you view education, all of that, all these critical things that affect your experience of schooling, education, and the world in general have already been shaped by your household, your home. Let's look at this, weekly hours. Again, it's just to get a bit of perspective. 24 times 7 equals 168. That's how many hours there are in a week. Now let's look at, for a typical 10-year-old, how those hours are broken down. 30 hours in school, normally, of course, it all depends now on COVID. Normally about 30 hours of those are in school. Maybe they go to tuition for 3 hours or ish. Maybe they spend, 8 hours a night in bed, maybe a little bit more, but something of that order. Maybe a few hours doing extracurricular things, something outside of the house, maybe. Okay, let's add up all those hours that they're out of the home. Tuition, school, extracurricular, and the hours that they're not awake. If you add those all up, it comes to maybe 90 plus hours, maybe around 100 hours, maybe a little bit more than 100 hours, which leaves quite a lot of hours, maybe between 60 and 70 hours, doing what? Well, they're at home and they're in your care. So what are they doing? Well, they're being influenced by you, is what they're doing. Now, back to the question, who's your greatest teacher? Well, each of us is our own greatest teacher. So you were right, if that's what you thought. You are in adult life. And actually, by the time you get to age 10, I would say, yes, you are. Of course, when a child is born, they are not their greatest teacher. They're relying on family, the household, mostly the parents. And as they get older, as they learn more and more, become more independent, then they become their greatest teacher. So we're not born our greatest teachers, but we do become that. And I think from experience that by age 10, children are their greatest teachers. So each of us is our own greatest teacher. After that, it's our parents who are our greatest teachers because they shape our mind management, our mindset, and our model of ourselves and the world, i.e. our own outlook, our own perspective. After that, our children are our greatest teachers because they remind us what it is to be curious. They question the things we prefer not to have to justify. They remind us how ignorant we once were and how far we've come. Now, that's a really important one, and it does deserve some explanation. Children are our greatest teachers because, or third greatest teachers, because they remind us how ignorant we once were and how far we've come. Sometimes when we're trying to teach our child something or explain something to them, we can feel frustration. Why don't they get it? It's so obvious, it's so simple. And then we just have to remember, we were once that age. And there are many things which are now completely obvious to us, completely self-evident, which at one time we had no clue about, no understanding of. And that should give us a great deal of comfort because we were once completely ignorant, naive, lacking knowledge, lacking understanding, lacking concepts. And look at us now. And the fact that we've been through that process should give us faith that, yes, our child isn't quite there yet. They have a lot to learn, a lot to understand, but we got there. And so with support and guidance, they probably will too. And then that can reduce our frustration with our children. And of course, that helps your child. Okay, so they are a reminder to us of how ignorant we once were and how far we've come. And very importantly, one of the things that makes children wonderful teachers for us is that they're not cynical about the world yet. And they need never be. So flourishing. So we're talking about your child's flourishing. I split it, from 100% into 50%, 40%, 10% at age 10. And of course, this changes through life. As adults, we become more or less 100% responsible for our flourishing. But at age 10, on average, children, 50% of their flourishing is in their own hands. But they're still very reliant on you in many ways. And 40% of their flourishing is in your hands, you the parent, which adds up to a whopping 90%. And the other 10% is the rest of the world, including formal education, schooling, tuition, and so on. But of course, there are lots of other influences as well on children. So schooling and tuition and so on are part of the 10%. So when I see parents busting a gut on schooling and tuition and what have you, then what's really happening is they're taking their eye off the ball because the much more dominant, much more overwhelming power for their child's flourishing isn't in those places, it's at home. In short, neither the academic flourishing of your child nor their flourishing as a person, again, I've got an extra word there, nor their flourishing as a person relies on which school or university they go to. By the time they're adults, their flourishing is almost 100% in their own hands. This is good news because what it means is that if your child has learned really good mind management and has nurtured a growth mindset, and all of this, of course, comes down to you, the parents, who are the biggest influence by far, then they can flourish anywhere. And flourish as people. Flourish academically too, but that's part of flourishing as a person. For all my experience of teaching, the quality of my work, my efforts, it counts for very little unless there is sound mind management and a growth mindset being practiced by the child and the parent. Okay, now we come to pay and absolve. You know, if I have a problem with my car, I mentioned this before, because I'm not a mechanic and I'm not interested in motor mechanics, I just want someone to fix it. So I take it to the garage and I say, oh, I'm having a problem with my car. Can you fix it? And they'll say, all right, we'll give you a call. And they'll call me and they'll say, Mr. Taylor, it's going to cost this much. And I'll say, go on then, fix it. And then when they call me to say it's ready, I'll go and pick it up, pay them, and then my car's fine. Same thing with my computer. If I'm having a problem with the computer, I'll take it to a shop, a repair shop, and I will say, look, I'm having this problem. Can you help me? Same story. Again, I'll just pay and I say, I'm leaving it to you. I just absolve myself of all responsibility for the repair. I don't want to know. You can talk technical jargon at me and it's going to go straight over my head. I'm not interested as long as it works. So I'll pay and absolve. That's fine. That's fine for fixing your car. That's fine for fixing your computer. But it is not fine for educating your child. It is not fine when it comes to education. You cannot say, here you are, Sir Tailor, here's $3.5 grand. Now my child passing the 11 plus and going to grammar school. Oh, up to you. Yeah, if only that was the case. But actually, my influence in the whole thing with all my expertise is teeny compared to what the child themselves can do and what you can do. At this age, you cannot leave your primary school child with a tutor and leave them to it, because the overlap between parenting and teaching is too great. They are at a really important stage in terms of their worldview, their outlook, their mind management, their mindset, all these things. And it requires you to be nurturing the things that are going to help your child. So work with us. This is why your education is so important to your child's flourishing, and why I sit here on a Sunday for 3 or 4 hours once a month, every month, open to all, free of charge. Come along, because your education is absolutely vital to your child's flourishing. Right. Now, I already know the answer to this question. So you want the best for your child. But what does this mean? Well, if you do want the best for your child, then don't compare them to somebody else. Don't hold up somebody else as a worthy example for them to follow. I know the intention is to inspire your child and say, oh, look what this person has achieved in their life. Look what this person has become. Wouldn't it be nice to be like them? And I know that's the intention, but that's not the effect. When you compare a child to somebody who has done many things or achieved things that the child has not achieved, it can have the impact not of inspiring your child, but making your child feel burdened. They can feel like, oh, I can never be quite as good as that person. I can never quite achieve what they have achieved. This is just normal. So although the intention of comparison is to inspire and motivate, it can actually do the exact opposite. The other thing, of course, is that whoever you are comparing to, whether it's your parent or their father or their mother or an uncle or a cousin or a school friend or somebody in the media, the comparison is not valid, because whatever another person may or may not have achieved in their lives, that person is not your son or your daughter. And if you have more than one child, they are not the same person. And there's no reason why they should be like each other and have similar talents and abilities and interests. They're a unique human being. So do them a favor and don't compare. Comparison is unkind, it's often manipulative, and it stifles the human. For a child, when they're being compared, you might as well say, you're no good, I wish you were more like that person, because that's what they hear. They don't need to hear that from mum or dad. The only person you should try to be better than is the person you were yesterday. In other words, if you're going to compare your child, compare them to themselves, and then only do it favorably. For example, perhaps last week your child learned a new word. Now you can point out then, you know what? 2 weeks ago you didn't know this word, and now you know it. Perhaps they're learning their times tables, and last week they didn't know their 4 times table, and now they know their 4 times table. You just remind them of the time when they didn't know their 4 times table, and look at them now. Wow, you've progressed through your own efforts. Everything you've learned is through your efforts. Look at you. Compare them to themselves. Back to it. So you want the best for your child? Okay. Well, that does depend on who your child is. Now, I'm going to ask for a show of hands here. And this is so I can gauge. I mean, I get an idea by looking at the names, but raise your hand if you're from a culture where being a medic, a doctor, carries great status, and parents and people within the community kind of aspire to that for themselves and for their children. Raise your hand if you're from a culture where that is the case. I mean, I'm raising both hands here. You know, essentially everybody who's from India, Pakistan, and many other parts of the world comes from that kind of a culture. Now, there is nothing wrong with that, by the way. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm just saying it's a thing. It's a thing. And I think most of you, from show of hands, recognize that that is the reality. And so anytime that a child, however young they are, shows academic promise, you've heard it yourselves, most of you, anytime that a child shows academic promise, then there's talk within the household and amongst relations and within the community. Oh, she's going to be a doctor when she grows up. She's going to be a doctor. She's going to go to medical school. He's going to be a doctor. There's all of that. And then the child is hearing that from a very young age. And I have to say, you know, is that about your child? Is it? I mean, maybe your child is cut out to be a doctor, but maybe they're not. Maybe they have a different calling. So in other words, what is best for your child, as a phrase, best for your child, depends on who your child is. So if you want the best for your child, then you need to know what it is that they want before you fill their head with what they're going to grow up to be. Then know and respect their aptitudes and natural inclinations and value them for who they are. What are their talents? What do they enjoy? What are they actually interested in? And try to avoid influencing their choices. Very dangerous thing to do, as I'm coming on to now. Look, to your child, you are like a god. Just think back to your own childhood and the way you looked at your parents. The awe in which you held your parents. Well, it's the same for your child. And you're the one that they look up to. You're the one they try to please. So your child's desire to please you can mislead you into believing that they want what you want for them, causing you to make choices that undermine their flourishing as human beings. Watch out. Try to avoid influencing their choices in that way. Obviously, we do want to influence the way that they manage their minds, but you want to be a bit careful about influencing them in other ways. Be wary of wishing your child or trying to turn them into someone they are not, because you cannot do that without stifling your child's true self. So you have to kind of give your child's true self the opportunity to flourish if you want the best for your child. Okay, so for some children, grammar schools are actually good. But you know, there are a minority of children For the majority of children, grammar schools are not a nice place to be. So how do you know? How do you know whether grammar school is a good place for your child or not? In other words, who are grammar schools suited to? Well, it's really very straightforward. The grammar schools are quite public and open about it. They provide a more academic education than your average comprehensive school. The expectations and workload are appropriate for children who have high academic potential. How high, I hear you ask? Well, it's the top 25%. So in other words, the 75th percentile upwards. They suit the learning needs of the top quarter, if you like, in terms of academic potential. And for other children, grammar schools are likely to be overwhelming and damaging. Just think of it. If a child is not particularly academic and they somehow get into a grammar school, put yourself in their shoes. What a horrible experience that's going to be. One, the work is going to be too hard. The expectations of children and teachers and your parents are going to be more than you can meet. You work hard, you try your best, but you just can't meet the expectations. You just can't keep up. You're always the bottom of the class in everything, and you feel it, and everybody else knows it. And that's the rest of your childhood. Imagine that. That's soul destroying, completely destroy the self-esteem of a child. So, don't try and get your child into a grammar school unless a grammar school is actually going to suit your child's learning needs, because that, again, it's all about you want the best for your child. Well, grammar school might not be the best learning environment for your child. Right, now let us assume that your child is particularly academic and that grammar school might very well suit their learning needs, in which case you should be thinking about 11 plus and preparing thoroughly for it so that they can have their shot. It is just an opportunity. It is not a do or die thing. Don't lose that perspective. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about 11 plus stuff. Now, in live seminars, I ask parents, what do you think is most important when preparing for 11 plus? And I was really quite taken aback, and I was a bit dumbfounded for a minute when the answers I got back were, oh, the practice papers, the mock test, the exam technique, and all of that, but none of which is the most important thing. And look, you can have perfect exam technique, you can master it, you can do hundreds of practice papers, you can have fantastic vocabulary, and you can be super fast. But the ceiling that is set there is set by the level of knowledge that you have gained in your lifetime. So I'm talking about the children. They're going to be 10 years old, most of them, when they sit the exam. And the exam consists of questions, maybe between 100 and 200 questions in a typical 11 plus. And the questions vary: subjects, verbal reasoning, non-verbal reasoning, numerical reasoning, literacy, numeracy, and shapes, in other words, or spatial ability. And so between 100 and 200 questions. Now, if children have knowledge, the sufficient knowledge, and they have sufficient skills such as comprehension, skills such as problem solving, skills such as knowing mathematical formulae, skills such as mental arithmetic, skills such as spatial ability, the ability to rotate, reflect, and so on. If they have the knowledge and they have the skills, they can answer lots of questions correctly. And then an exam technique comes into it a little bit. But if you have perfect exam technique, you can still score 0 because you didn't have the knowledge and the skills required to answer the questions. So all those things that people think are the most important things are not. The most important things are actually the knowledge and the skills that are being tested. An exam technique is simply giving yourself the opportunity to demonstrate the knowledge and the skills that you've built up over your lifetime. So, putting those things, the exam technique, as the most important thing is actually taking your eye off the ball. It's all about learning the knowledge and learning the skills that are tested by the 11 plus test. And number one, wake up, is English. English is ace, king, and queen. Now I'm referring to a deck of cards. You know, the ace, the king, and the queen are the three most powerful cards, excluding jokers. Okay, so in the normal deck of 52. English is ace, king, and queen. It is by far the most important of 11 plus subjects. So if you do want to give your child the best chance of flourishing in 11 plus, when it comes to subjects, help them to develop their mastery of English, which I'll come back to how you can help them with that. But that is the number one most important subject by far. Some people will tell you, oh, it depends. It depends. Are they going to sit CEM or GL? You have to prepare differently according to whether it's CM or GL. That's a pile of something I can't say. What do most grammar schools, why do they tell you then that, oh, your exam is CL? Like, for example, in Buckinghamshire, where I live, they use GL, Granada Learning. And Slough, next county, they use a paper provided by CEM. Why do they bother to tell you this? The reason is because it doesn't help you. Now, some people will try and tell you, yes, it does. No, that's the thing. That's the determining thing. It is not. That information is trivial. Because whoever is setting the 11 plus, they are testing the same knowledge and the same skills. Now you'll say, oh, but their format of the questions differs. Yes, there are some differences in the formats, but you know, the formats of the questions and formats of the papers are not fixed, and they can be different this year from what they were last year. And two, the format of the question is a very tiny thing. It's like this. If I wanted to test a child's times tables, I will ask them questions in a particular way. And then at school, they may be tested on their times tables another way. But if your child knows their times tables, they're going to blitz the test. And that's the same principle with everything else in 11 plus. If your child has the knowledge and the skills, they're going to blitz it. So when you get your attention drawn away from the knowledge and the learning and the gaining of the knowledge and the skills, and it's put on to practice papers and mocks and CEM and GL and, oh, it's got to be the exam technique. It's usually coming from someone who doesn't know what to teach or how to teach it. So keep your eye on the ball. It's about the skills and the knowledge. And it does not matter who is setting the exam. Some schools set their own exam, and there are other providers, external providers too. It doesn't matter. So what is it then that's being tested in the 11 plus tests? Well, I did mention English literacy. So whether you call it English or you call it comprehension or you call it verbal reasoning, there are many different ways of testing it. You know, comprehension is just one way of testing. A comprehension test is just one way of testing literacy skills. You get also close, which is filling in missing bits in words or sentences or paragraphs, jumbled sentences. Synonyms, antonyms, word belongs both, and lots of other ways that literacy is tested. But in essence, it's literacy that's being tested. Skill with English, mastery of British English. And I say that's about 75% of the 11 plus test. Now, I'll just explain the arithmetic a little bit there. Because if you look at the CEM exam for Berkshire, which I mentioned, Slough, and the GL exam for Buckinghamshire, where I live, the weighting of the subjects is that the literacy aspects, the English stroke verbal, is 50%. It's weighted at 50%. That doesn't mean 50% of the questions are on those subjects, but the weighting of the scores is 50% for the literacy aspects. And then the other 50% is split roughly equally between nonverbal reasoning and numerical reasoning. So from that, you might think, oh, but surely that means only 50% of the test is English or literacy. No, wrong. I'll come back to why that's not the case. Numeracy, reasoning with quantities, knowledge of mathematics, skill with numbers, problem-solving skills. Spatial skills, reasoning with shapes, knowledge of shapes, observation, spatial skill. Those are the things being tested. Now it comes back to, why am I therefore saying 75%? Well, look at this. 75% of the marks are for the literacy bits, literacy questions in the test. But every single question in the mathematics section is in English. And no matter what the mathematical skills of the child may be, unless they have good comprehension skills, then they're not going to understand the maths question, unless it's the most basic question. So doing well in maths requires a very good mastery of English. Now, in addition to that, all the examples in the 11 plus are in English, even in the nonverbal reasoning. Furthermore, all the instructions given on the paper and all the spoken instructions given in the exam room and all the recorded instructions that guide the children through the test papers are in English. So I think that saying 75% of the 11 plus test is English is actually slightly conservative. So I again repeat, if you want your child to excel in 11 plus, then the overwhelming amount of effort needs to be on their mastery of English. Speed is unfortunately an issue in 11 plus. You do have to not only be able to answer the questions, but be efficient in answering the questions so you can answer enough questions. So speed is tested in the exam. And it's something that we work on from the beginning of the program, because it's something children can learn to work more efficiently and a bit more quickly. And of course, ultimately, the ability to perform well in tests is being tested by any test. Now, that's the nature of the test. So what is needed in order to prepare for such a test? Well, access to an excellent syllabus. They need to be taught well. On my programs, you may be aware, I do all the teaching. I use all of my experience to try and make all the concepts and methods as crystal clear as I possibly can. So I'm using my experience to do all the teaching, and I record myself doing the teaching, and your child has access to that. Not only your child, but so do you. I'll come back to that. They need to ask, that is the children, they need to ask questions, and they need to be asked questions a lot. Because that way they're really being put to the test, meaning their understanding of something is really being challenged and reinforced through that question and answer. They, the children, need feedback and guidance on their learning, i.e. not just scores. It's what is it that they can do? What do they need to learn? What knowledge do they need to gain? What skills do they need to improve? That's what they really need to know, so they can work on it. And we do that, by the way, after every lesson, after every session. Anything that's noteworthy, anything that's worth knowing, we'll feed it back to you and your child in writing. They need suitable practice resources. Anybody can get hold of those. You just go in on the internet, search for 11 plus practice materials, and there's a vast choice there. So that's the easy bit. They need someone to turn to when they have questions. We make a lot of time available in lessons to help children with their questions and queries. And above all, they need your support. You, mum and dad, they need your support. You are the 40%, remember? Your child is the 50%. They have 50% of the control or power over their flourishing. You have the 40%. They need you more than they need me. I'm a little teeny bit of the 10%. However, I'm trying to leverage that because you, the mum and dad, are not the expert in preparing a child for 11 plus, but I am. You need someone to guide you in how to support your child's learning. I am at your service. That's why I'm sitting here on a Sunday morning with you. I'm giving you support and guidance right now and throughout the course. And I do the same for my colleagues, the learning coaches, the tutors who conduct the live lessons on my behalf. So how to improve mastery of English? Seeing as this is the #1 subject, here's a bit of guidance on how to do it. Again, of course, you're very welcome to take a screenshot if you so wish. How to improve mastery of English. Children could read, number one. That is the number one most important activity. Read at least 30 minutes daily, and preferably an hour a day when there is no school. Read a mixture of fiction and non-fiction. Read different genres and authors. Vary the non-fiction. Non-fiction, often encyclopedias, but it could also be newspapers, magazines, internet articles. Just one mention, anything that's on the internet, a lot of what's on the internet is American, and it uses American English. Now, American English often is the same as British English, but there are sometimes some small differences in usage and sometimes differences in spelling. Now, children will not know the differences because they haven't grown up in a world which wasn't dominated by American literature, American articles on the internet and so on. So for them, there's no way for them to know. So just be wary that if your child is reading, as far as possible, try and keep it to British sources, which will use British English. And although American authors, some of them are very popular with the children, have a look on Google and find that author's name. There's, what's it called? What's the encyclopedia on the internet called? Ooh, I use it all the time. But anyway, you'll find it, an entry for the author, and one of the first things it will say is the nationality of the author. And if it says American, find somebody else. Okay, it's simply that your child won't know the difference, and they'll be using American English and they'll be using American spellings without realizing. Insist that your child speaks in sentences, expresses themselves clearly and accurately, and don't finish their sentences for them. Now, this means being a little bit of a pain in the neck for them, okay? But I think it's really worthwhile because you are the biggest influence on your child. And if you insist on your child speaking in sentences, they will get practice at doing that, a lot of it. And if they don't practice that, then it's a skill that's going to remain underdeveloped. Now, as mums and dads, we know our children very well. They barely have to even open their mouth before we know what they want and what they want to say. And because of that, just to keep things simple and easy, we finish their sentences for them, or we don't ask them to finish their sentences. But of course, it prevents them from having to think through how they're going to finish their sentence. And then they don't develop the skill of self-expression as well as they could have. So although it seems like a pedantic thing to do, doing this actually helps them develop their mastery of English, especially the aspect of self-expression. And if you're thinking about creative writing, that it's absolutely essential. If you want to be good at creative or extended writing, you have to think through how you're going to finish your sentence before you put pencil to paper. And that is part of the skill of self-expression. And like any other skill, it can be learned and improved. As far as possible, learn words in context, because then it helps us to appreciate their meaning. Of course, we can't always do that, and sometimes we do just pick words out in isolation from practice papers and such. But reading is a really great way to improve vocabulary because you see words being used, so you see them in context, which helps us to better appreciate their usage. Vocabulary is one of those things that you'll never run out of because the English language has over 1 million words in it, and nobody knows more than a tiny proportion of those words. So you'll never run out of words to learn, and your target should not be to know every word because that is not possible. It's actually not possible. So your target is not to know every word that there is to know, and there is no list of words for 11 plus, and if anybody tries to tell you there is, they don't know what they're talking about. The best that you or your child can do is to learn as many words as you can, but you can only learn so many new words in a day before your brain is frazzled. So you can't overdo it. So the only sensible way to do it is by learning a few new words every day and then reviewing them every now and then. And it might be an idea for you to, I mean, if English is not your first language, that is, to develop your own English and vocabulary. You know, if it's good enough for mom and dad, it's good enough for your child, because your child looks up to you, and that's what they'll be saying. You know, if it's good enough for my mom and my dad, it's good enough for me. Now, you know, we may rave about reading being such a fantastic thing, such a wonderful habit, but you have to say to yourself, you know, I'm raving to my son or I'm raving to my daughter about the importance of reading. But when do they ever see me reading? If they never see you reading, you're only saying, you know, then that's might not be very convincing to them. Likewise with developing a mastery of English. If English is your second language and you're aware that you're sometimes not using English correctly, you're not speaking correctly, you're not pronouncing words correctly and so on. Correctly for British English, I'm conscious that there's Indian English and there's American English and there's Australian English and they're different from each other, but it has to be British English for the 11 plus. So if you're conscious that your British English can be improved, then if you work at improving it, that's inspirational to your child. So be a good role model of learning, reading, mind management, and a growth mindset. Because if your child, if you're saying one thing but doing another, your child is going to give greater importance to what you are doing. So don't say do as I say and not as I do. That's not going to cut it. If you want your child to believe in persevering with efforts to learn, let them see a worthy example to follow, meaning you must persevere with efforts to learn. Of course, you may not be learning the same things as your child, but we're all learning all the time. Okay, so when you're choosing tuition for your child, here's some pointers about what to look for. I hope it's self-evident that tuition should optimize learning, not testing. That the group has to be small, 10 or less, so that your child can interact and the tutor can identify and address and communicate individual learning needs. Then you too can support their learning. Look, I could spend a 2-hour seminar, probably an 8-hour seminar, purely extolling the virtues of the small group format that I've described here, but I'm not going to. I run a small group format at great expense and at zero profit because it's the most powerful learning format. The tutor must mark some of the homework. Marking homework is an onerous task, but I do it because it gets me into the child's head. It allows me to see what they've understood, what they've not understood, where they're going wrong in their thinking, and therefore to identify not only their progress, but also their learning needs. And then I can give some guidance to them and to you in order to progress the child. Now, if you're choosing tuition, you should also ask, they say they're good, but do they back it up with a money back guarantee? Anybody can say they're good. And anybody can say, oh, we've got a high pass rate. Do they back it up? Choosing tuition. Now, here are things to look out for, red flags, if you like. So when I say run a mile if, what I mean is these are not recommended. If they pack more than 12 people in a room. Now, when I say more than 12 people in a room, I mean including any assistants and what have you. If there are more than 12 people in a room, then I think for learning purposes, that's not going to be an ideal environment, far from it. If they give a pre-test before accepting a child onto a course, run a mile. I'll tell you why. You might think, oh, but I want my child to have a test before they join the course. I want to know where they are. I want to know if they can make it. Well, I know it seems like a good idea, but I'm going to tell you why it isn't. One, because a test is not going to tell you what your child does and doesn't know. It's going to measure their performance in the test, number one. And two, there is no test which is going to tell you what your child's potential to learn is. So actually, what is that test telling you? Nothing very useful. It's just a way of making you think you're getting some useful information when you are not, in fact, getting useful information. But the useful information you are getting is not about your child, but about the person who's giving the test. Basically, when they're giving the test and saying, oh, if your child gets over a certain level, then they can do the course, what they're really saying is, I'm not very good at teaching. So unless your child comes in at a certain level, then I can't really help you. The way I see it, it's not the level at which a child comes onto my program that matters, but that they have an enthusiasm for learning, a hunger for learning, and that they have aptitude, that they are teachable, they're coachable. Because whatever level a child comes in at, as long as, of course, they can read, then I believe in teaching. I believe in my expertise as a teacher, that if a child comes in and they have a hunger for learning and they have an aptitude for learning, I can teach them and they're going to learn a massive amount. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get a great score in 11 plus, but they're going to learn a massive amount. And then who knows what their learning potential might be? We don't, and a test is not going to show you that. So anybody gives a pre-test, you've got to think that's a cynical thing there. If the tutor does not mark any homework, they are not sufficiently interested in your child's progress or in their learning needs. If you yourself do not have access to the learning, run. Because you know, what is that? Your child goes to a 3-hour lesson once a week. They are there getting taught probably, and then they come home and they have homework to do, and then they get stuck on something, and you say, oh, but didn't they teach you that in the lesson? And you can say, yes, they did say that, but I didn't really understand it. And they'll say, then you say to your child, but didn't you ask the teacher? And you say, yeah, I did ask, but I still didn't really understand it. Or yes, I understood at the time, but I've forgotten now. And then you say, well, I'll try and help you, but I don't really know what method your teacher is teaching you. And then sometimes parents feel reluctant to help their children in that way because they're not teachers, they're not the subject matter experts, and they don't want to confuse their child. They don't want to show them some contradictory method. And so they're hesitant about supporting their child, even though they're willing and they're making time for it. And they have zero access to the teaching. Well, in my programs, we completely overcome that. You, the parent, has 100% access to the teaching. You have access to all the teaching because the teaching is done by me. So it's my teaching of my program, my course, my units, my resources, and I'm teaching it. And I'm teaching it and I'm recording myself teaching it so that not only does your child have access to it, but, and repeatedly, by the way, but so do you. Just consider the power of that model. If you don't have access to the learning, that restricts just in what ways and how much you can support your child's learning. And your support to your child's learning is absolutely critical. You have one hand tied behind your back unless you have access to the learning. If the focus is on testing instead of learning, or if it's on the volume of work instead of on the quality of the learning, if they stoke up hype about techniques and test scores and CEM and GL and mock tests and all of that, run a mile, if any of those. A little plug, meaning a little push for my own company. The values expressed in this presentation are encapsulated in my courses because they're my courses and these are my values. We use a highly interactive small group format for the live lessons. We work at optimizing our collaboration with you, mum and dad, in recognition that your role is so much more important than my role. You get feedback, you can call it a report if you prefer, and guidance, coaching if you like, about how you can support your child weekly. If there is anything noteworthy, anything worthy of mention, we'll mention it to you so that you can also feel like, yeah, you're doing the right thing. That's part of our job. We're sharing our expertise with you to empower you to also give support. So it's a real collaboration with you. My 11 plus course, which actually started this weekend, the new one, it started this weekend. I had a lesson on Friday, and there are lots of lessons going on this weekend too, and in the coming week. Some of them in venues, thankfully, because some of these venues have opened up despite the COVID thing. Some of them are allowing and some are not, unfortunately. So we did have to rearrange some of the courses, some of the slots, because the venues decided no, they don't want to risk it. Nevertheless, we do have lessons going on in a number of venues, but of course, COVID doesn't affect the online access to the live lessons, i.e. the distance learning course. It started, and that course, it's so effective, and I'm so committed that it is effective, that it comes with a money-back guarantee. Terms apply, I have to say that by law. Do you know of anyone else in 11 plus who's good enough to do this? I don't. I keep asking. Nobody's come forward yet. And I've had that guarantee there for nearly 20 years. My foundation course, which is for children who've just started year 4, really important, please perk up your ears. If you have a child in year 4 or you know somebody who does, they should do my foundation course, because I've designed the foundation course, and again, I teach all the lessons and you, the parents, have access to all the teaching. And again, your child can access the live lesson via Zoom, or they can go to a location. That one hasn't started yet. It starts in not next weekend, but the following weekend. So Saturday the 26th, I believe it is. It starts then. So you can get in right from the beginning, or if you just miss out on the beginning, you can join early on in the program. And I'm doing a little promotion to try and get children into the program at the start so they don't miss the beginning of it. And I'm having a September sale. This September sale means that if you are a client and you recommend another person to join the foundation course, then you will get a reward. That is a deduction on the course fees if they complete the course. Now, the exact details of that will be on the website in the next few days, but that is a promotion in order to try and get children to join the foundation course from the beginning. And the foundation course is a stepping stone to the 11 plus course. The 11 plus course is very intense, and it needs to be intense because of the level of competition. If a child has not been to some structured tuition in year 4, the 11 plus course can come as a little bit of a shock. Now, that doesn't apply to every child. It does depend on the child, but it is a stepping stone for any child onto the 11 plus course. So if you have a child in year 4 and you're thinking 11 plus, that would be a good step. We do run lessons in various locations: Slough, Langley, Cranford, Heston, Hounslow, Feltham, and of course, as I mentioned, at a computer near you. It doesn't matter which part of the country you're in. It doesn't matter which exams your child is doing. 11 plus is testing the same skills. Having said that, some don't test nonverbal reasoning. Some do test creative writing and some don't. The majority of schools do, well, they would all test numeracy and literacy. But some will also test nonverbal reasoning, and some will also test creative writing. Nonverbal reasoning is part of the 11 plus course. Creative writing is an optional extra that you would pay separately for, but it is available for those who want it. So the course that I run is excellent preparation for any 11 plus test, no matter which part of the country you're in. So now you might be thinking, well, I was just thinking about the traditional course. Well, my course is not traditional. It's forward-looking. It's progressive. And you might have thought, well, it's got to be in a room. It's got to be in a room. Well, you know, there are benefits to being in a room. And I really like teaching children in a classroom as opposed to Zoom. I love both, but I do prefer teaching in a classroom. But there are pros and cons to both. So I'm just going to mention a couple of them. First of all, it is the same course, the same program of learning, which is what the course is. The difference is in how your child accesses the live lessons. Everything else is the same resources, the same teaching videos, the same information, the same guidance, the same feedback, the same homework that the learning coach is marking, etc., etc., etc. Those things are 80% or more of the learning program. The live lessons, which children attend for about 3 hours a week for the 11 plus and a bit over 2 hours a week for the foundation course, is at best 20% of the program of learning. And your child can access the live lesson by going to a venue or via Zoom. Okay, so that's really what the difference is. And if you do the distance learning course, which means live lessons are via Zoom, you can stay at home, which is very convenient, and it saves you time and effort. And of course, in these days, safety being a very important concern, your child is in your own home and you're in control completely of their safety. You know they're safe. Okay, so there are a lot of pros to the live lesson being accessed via Zoom. It's actually quite a lot less expensive from your point of view. It's not that that much less expensive from my side, but it is from yours. So you can save quite a lot of money just by your child accessing the live lesson via Zoom. The standard course, the traditional course, where lessons take place in a classroom, as a teacher, a tutor, a learning coach, I have greater scrutiny of the children. On Zoom, I do see the children and I see their reactions and I can look into their eyes and I have a lot of interaction with the children, and it's a very powerful format. But when they're in the classroom, I see the whole child. I see more of their body language, and I just feel a little bit more in control of the learning environment. I have greater scrutiny. I can see the work that they're doing, more of it, and it comes with a money back guarantee. Now, I do a lot of consultations, Zoom consultations, with parents and very often with their children too, where parents are seeking my input and guidance about their child's preparations for 11 plus. One such person I spoke to some time ago now, perhaps in July, I talked to him for a good long while. He asked me lots of questions about preparing his daughter for 11 plus. And one question he asked me is, what's the pass rate for the children who complete your course? And I said, oh, I was very proud to say that the children who completed my course in 2019, which is the last one for which we have results, I said was 90%. Now, I was very proud of that because, in fact, 90% is an immense pass rate. Because you have to remember that out of all the children who take the 11 plus, probably about 85% don't pass it. Something of that order. But 90% of the children who completed my course passed that year. Usually the pass rate is more like 75 to 80% for my program. That's average over 20 years, by the way. But last year was particularly high. So I thought he was going to be impressed. Far from it. He came straight back with, why did the other 10% fail? Now, I don't like to use the word fail because no child fails. But he asked me, why don't they all pass? What about the other 10%? What went wrong, in essence? And it took me aback a little bit because I thought, well, that's a very interesting. And I'm thinking, oh, right, I should address that. So here we go. The test, the 11 plus test, is designed to get a spread of scores. It's a selection test. They want to spread the children out along a continuum, and they want to cream off the most academic of those children. Okay, so it's said the test is designed for that purpose, so that by definition, the majority cannot pass. That's by definition, that's the design of the test. So the majority of children who sit the 11 plus do not pass it. That's the design feature of the test. It's not like GCSEs. Look, GCSEs are what they call criterion referenced. Criterion reference testing means that if you know this, 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 and this, and you have the skill to do this, this, and this, you can get a grade C. Whereas if you have these additional skills and this additional knowledge, you get a grade B. And if you have these skills and this knowledge, if you demonstrate these skills and this knowledge, you get a grade A. That is criterion reference testing. That is, if you have certain knowledge and certain skills, or rather, if you demonstrate certain knowledge and certain skills, you get a particular grade. It's not like that with 11 plus. 11 plus is what we call norm referenced testing. Norm reference means how do you compare with your cohort, your peers, the other children sitting the test the same time as you. So it doesn't matter how brilliant you are. If all the other children that year were more brilliant than your child doesn't get in. So in other words, it's comparison with their cohort, the other children who did the exam. That is norm reference testing. So by definition, most children who sit the 11 plus cannot pass. That's number one reason. Number two, many times children may have the academic potential, the academic ability, but they didn't do enough study, they didn't do enough work, or they kind of psych themselves out. This is to do with mind management skills, the number one most important factor in the child's flourishing, poor mind management skills. Second most important factor, they exercise too much of a fixed mindset. And usually it's because the parents themselves exercise too much of a fixed mindset. It was all about scores and numbers and not enough about the learning. Lack of a foundation. Yes, if a child comes to me and they're eager to learn and they have the potential to learn, they're going to learn a massive amount. But there's only so much ground they can make up in a year or 2 years. They're going to be about 10 years old when they sit the exam. And the last year or 2 years cannot make up for not paying attention to their life for the previous 8 years. So a lack of foundation. Lack of parental support and involvement. You know your child absolutely needs that. It doesn't matter how well I do my job, unless the child is getting sufficient right kind of parental support and involvement, they can't quite perform to their capabilities. Sometimes maybe all the other things were right and they just had a bad day. That happens to all of us. There are so many things which are out of your control. Look, the first symptom that I have that I'm getting ill is not a runny nose or a temperature or coughing. None of those. The first symptom I usually notice when I'm becoming ill is that I have difficulty doing simple arithmetic, like remembering my times tables. That's my first sign, my first symptom that I notice that I'm getting ill. Because when I'm getting ill, I haven't even shown any other symptoms yet, but I'm not able to focus. Not well enough even to know my times tables. I have to think about it. Now, you just think, if your child had no other symptoms of illness and they were just beginning to get something, their ability to focus can be drastically affected. And they can do really poorly in that test. And they themselves won't even know that they were affected like that, let alone you know. And the illness may never then develop. So you'll be completely mystified that, oh, you did so great. You were learning so much and you did so great in all those practice papers and those mock tests. What happened? And it'll be a mystery. Now that's just one simple example of something that can happen on the day over which nobody has any control. Sometimes we don't sleep well And we don't even know why. Usually it's something subconscious, something we saw, something we heard that day. We may not even have consciously registered it, but overnight it affects our sleep. Now, if you didn't get a full night's sleep, a normal night's sleep, which by the way is not completely within your control, it's going to affect your ability to focus the next day. You all know that. And it's going to affect your child's ability to focus on that day. These are just a couple of examples of things which are completely out of anybody's control, which can have a drastic effect on your child's performance on the day of the exam. So if you previously thought that, yes, it is in my control, it is in my child's control to pass the 11 plus, I hope you understand by now that it absolutely is not. And that's why it cannot be a sensible goal. They had a bad day, or if everything else was right and they really did do their best throughout the program and you really gave them superb support and they had the best tuition from yours truly, and that on the day they did actually perform to their best but did not make the cut, then that is a very great indicator that, phew, good job they didn't go to grammar school, because it would have been overwhelming for them. They are not cut out for grammar school if everything went right, but they didn't make the cut. They are not cut out for grammar school. So here's a summary. Flourishing requires effective mind management and a growth mindset. Those are the most important things, hence the 2 books that I issue to the parents of children on the 11 plus course. 50, 40, 10. 50% is in the hands of the child, they're flourishing. 40% of your child's flourishing by the time they're 10, by the way, is in your hands. And 10% is the rest of the world, of which formal education and tuition is a part. So remember that. So before you bust a gut on how my child has to get into this school or that university, remember that the actual, your child's mind management, growth mindset, and your parenting are overwhelmingly more important to their flourishing than the schooling and other formal education. And that if they are preparing for 11 plus, then a mastery of English is paramount. And if you're choosing tuition, choose small group tuition that maximizes engagement and learning rather than testing. I have a request of you. Please tell your friends. Courses are starting. The 11 plus has already started. Foundation is starting in just under 2 weeks. If they are serious about preparing their child, if their child, if they think it is academic and could benefit from a grammar school education, then they ought to prepare very thoroughly and very well for it. That's what I do. If they're serious about preparing the child for 11 plus, they should talk to me ASAP. They can arrange a consultation. Anybody here, some of you I've already spoken with before. You know how easy it is. You telephone the support team and you say, oh, I'd like to arrange a consultation with Mr. Tailor, please. And they'll slot you in wherever there is a vacancy. I'd be very happy to talk to you. I'd be very happy to talk to your friend. If you think that your friend could benefit by talking to me, please tell them, call us. Even if they've already signed up elsewhere for a course and then they realize, oh, this isn't really what I expected, or it's not as good as I thought it was going to be, they can change their mind because they don't have to stick with a bad decision. I'll be very happy to talk to anybody. We do not run for profit. We largely rely on word of mouth of people who have had experience of us, because they're the ones who know that this is different. This is actually about your child. So anybody who might actually be thinking in those terms, I'd be very happy to talk to them and share my expertise with them. So just point them in my direction. I have an end thought, which is this: every parent, i.e. you, has the chance to make the world a better place by the example that they set for their children. What's the alternative? In other words, if we're not all doing that, what are we doing? Thank you so much for your attention. If you really need to go, please go. But I do recommend, if you possibly can, to stay for the Q&A. As I said at the beginning, even if you don't have a question, you might very well benefit from the questions that other people ask. But before I do open up the Q&A, just do keep your question brief, and that way we can get through more questions. In other words, don't make a speech. and do end it with a question mark rather than just passing a comment or making a statement. Please ask me questions. And then if you are falling foul of some important principles or factors, then I will refer to those principles and factors. I'll call you out. So I'm now going to stop sharing my screen. And so you could now see me. I'm just going to check that you can actually see me and hear me. And again, at the top of my list of attendees, I have Amreen. So Amreen, I'm going to enable you to speak again. And are you able to see and hear me? Can you confirm? I think you'll have to unmute yourself first.
Hello.
Yes, hi, Amreen. Could you hear me and see me?
I didn't. I lost connection for a while there.
Right. Okay. Okay. But now can you?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you very much for confirming that. Okay, I'll now disable you from speaking. And what I do is I will now take your questions and answer them to the best of my ability. Whatever issue you wish to raise, any question or query that's in your mind, just raise your hand and I will see on my list of attendees any raised hands. The first I have here is from Mohammed Muzaffar, it looks like. So Mohammed, I'm enabling you to...
Yes, thank you, Sir Tailor. I listened to your presentation. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Yes. Just wanted to know if my child were to join you
Yes.
and take up the course, would she be prepared for both CEM and GL?
Yes,
Because she may be
unequivocally, sir, I can say to you
she may
that...
take more than one center exam.
Say the last part again.
She may opt to take one, not just one center. She may like to take a center in Slough and maybe another center somewhere else. So
Yes, sir.
be prepared for both.
Absolutely. Not just both, but there are many other companies or organizations that set 11+ tests, and some grammar schools set either the whole test themselves or parts of their 11+ test themselves. It doesn't make any difference who is setting the test. The 11+ program is a program of learning the content, if you like, the subject matter, the knowledge and the skills required for 11+ tests. So the 11+ program, the difference between the tests is trivial. You know, whether it was set by CEM or it was set by GL or it was set by somebody else, it doesn't make a difference to what it is that your child needs to learn. So your child learns the knowledge and the skills needed for any 11+ test, all 11+ tests. If you're concerned that, you know, people do hype up, is it CEM or is it GL? It actually isn't important. The difference, if you, I think that right towards the end of their preparations, in the last month or two, it is helpful to the children to do practice papers which are in a CEM format or a GL type format, just so that they're accustomed to how it looks. But the actual subject matter that is being tested is the same. So the program absolutely prepares children for CEM exams and GL exams. And in fact, for the children who come to one of my venues, which are all in West Middlesex and in Slough Langley area, the actual physical venues, I'm expecting all of them to sit for Slough and for Buckinghamshire, because I totally feel that after the vast amount of effort that the children and parents and me and my team make, the child should have more than one bite of the cherry, by which I mean it should not come down to them having to perform on one particular day, i.e. that they sit only one 11+ test. I believe that would be a mistake, because anybody could have a bad day. So I'm a strong advocate that every child should sit at least 2 11+ tests. And for the, like I said, Slough and Buckinghamshire, for the kids who come to one of the venues. But I'm aware that many of the children who complete my program also sit for Tiffin, and they tend to do well in there. They also sit for some of the Sutton schools, and they do well there. I know that some also sit for QE, and Henrietta Barnett up in Northwest London. And some also sit further afield, like in Birmingham. So the program of learning prepares children for all of those, sir. The only additional thing that children may require for some schools is creative writing. That is not part of the course, but it is available several times a year as an optional extra. So for example, some of the Sutton schools and Tiffin School, they have a creative writing paper as part of their test. So the answer to your question in short is a yes. And I agree with you. Each child should sit at least 2 tests, and this program prepares them for all tests.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, and thank you for your question, sir. Now I will lower your hand, and if anybody else would like to ask any question, please just raise your hand and I will enable you to speak. Oh, I said so much. I feel like something might have come to your mind, or I said something that didn't quite make sense. Or you may have a query that, or an issue that you're having with your child that you would like a little bit of guidance with. I'd be very happy to provide anything that I can. Well, I'm not seeing any hands, so it could be an early lunch for me, which I don't mind, but I am here at your disposal and very, very happy to address any question or query that you may have. Okay, I have a hand up from Samina Awan. I'm just enabling you. Okay, Samina, I've enabled you to speak, so I think you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello there. Hi. Sorry, I missed the first part of the recording because I had to drop my son off to Scouts.
Okay.
Will we be able to access this recording, this seminar that you're doing right now later on? Or
Well, it is recorded, and it is my intention to make it available for public consumption.
okay.
But I can't promise when that will be.
Okay.
But if I do put it up on YouTube, I will notify everybody of it. Okay, because I think, yes, it was well worth seeing, because I set the scene and shared some important information and insights in that part. So I can't promise it or when it will be, but I think I will put it up on YouTube. But you see, I also have recorded numerous previous seminars that I have done in this same, 11+ education for parents. And what I really want to do is to include the Q&A, because very often the Q&A is very enriching, especially for parents, because it's parents asking questions that are in their minds. So when I do put it up on YouTube, I really want to be incorporating the Q&A from many previous presentations too. I may put this up, I think, because now the courses are beginning and parents really need to have access to these insights.
It would be really great if you do.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the sentiment, and I do think now the time has come that even though today people seem not to have that many questions, in the past I've got so many questions, literally hours worth of question and answer, that would be so useful for parents.
I do have another question. You might have already answered some of this in because I missed definitely the first half of the
That's
session.
all right.
So I don't. My daughter's just started with. She just had her first session yesterday, and she. I tried to teach her 11+ myself. She's just joined year 5,
okay.
And even though I think I'm capable of teaching her most things, I realized that watching her in the session with her tutor, that it was definitely worth it. She just had a different level of focus,
Yes.
and she didn't really care when she was doing it with me. But I can see being in a class, talking to the teacher, and maybe having a couple of other students there made all the difference, and it kind of gave her a little competitive edge again.
Yeah, I think you're right that home is home. Children are relaxed at home, and the relationship that parents have with their children. Look, I've been teaching since 1985. I can't teach my daughters, because I'm dad. First and foremost, I am dad. And even when I try to be teacher, it's not the same, because I am dad. So it's not that I've lost my teaching skills. It's just that from their point of view, I'm dad. And so it is different when it's a formal learning environment and the person teaching you is not your relation or your friend, then the children respond differently. I see this so often, Mrs. Awan, that when I give feedback about a child to the parent is thinking, is this even the same child?
Yes.
That is such a frequent thing.
Yes.
And sometimes when I am full of praise for a child's efforts and what have you, the parent will come back and say, oh, he's a complete terror at home. I can't get him to sit down and do a thing. He won't do a thing unless I'm sitting looking over his shoulder and making him do it. And so on. And I think, what? Such a completely different child when they're in the room. So your observation is totally accurate. And I can bear that out with my own experience.
Yeah.
That
So,
children do respond differently when they're in a learning environment,
yes,
which is a
definitely.
formal one.
I because traveling to one of your centers would have been a little bit of a trial, but and I was a bit hesitant about doing the online learning because I just think to myself, children sometimes switch off during online learning. But
Yes.
I asked her afterwards, what did you think? And she said, yeah, mummy, it was hard, but it was kind of fun as well. I said, oh, are you happy now that I've put you in these classes? Because at the time she's like, why did you put me in? I don't want to do 3 hours of work every Sunday. But she's I think it was the right call, and I would say to any parent who's like thinking of doing the distance learning courses, definitely. I have got another question too. When I was talking to your advisor before I joined up to the course, they mentioned something about CPG and bond books, but there don't seem to be that many books inside the bag. Is that something that I need to purchase myself? What would you advise?
You don't need to purchase any books for the program. What we do, since you signed up for the distance learning program, when we posted you the kit, it would have had, I think, 5 publications.
Yes.
We call them pubs for short, 5 pubs in there.
Yes.
That's just for the first half term. What we do is we'll be posting you more things. We'll be posting you some more sheets during this week for use in session 2.
Okay.
And we'll also later on for the next half term be posting you another set of publications. So throughout the program, you'll be issued publications. In total, through the 11 Plus program, we issue about 30 publications. So it's more or less one per session. So it amounts to quite a lot. You do not need to purchase any additional work. Some parents choose to do that because their children are accustomed to sort of doing additional work, and some parents are happier seeing their children being kind of busy every day with the work. So that is optional though, and it depends on the child. And I'm wary that the work we give is the right amount and that it is more than sufficient because we do not wish to overwhelm the children. What I'll do is the books that you have got, week by week, I issue work from those books. So for example, your daughter needs to complete test 1 and test 2 from the Schofield and Sims mental arithmetic book.
Okay.
And I set work from there every week, but I also set work from other books. So the children get a nice variety of practice each week, but that it's not too much either.
Okay.
So
I did unfortunately miss her session because I had to go to work and I was really upset. I was like, I'm missing your session, which is why I asked her. So when I said to her, so what do you have to do? She says, I have to do some homework. She doesn't seem to be clear about what she needed to do. So I don't know, what's my port of call? Who do I contact for these kind of things?
You're talking to the man who sets all the work. So you're talking to the right person. Apart from the Schofield and Sims, we get her doing that, plus there are currently, I think, 4 videos that she can view via her login. And you yourself, madam, can also study those videos. There's one about using a dictionary. There's one about place value, one about putting words in alphabetical order, and there's one about components. These videos are the units, the topics that she needs to study and do some work on prior to the next lesson. So there's a good bit for her to be getting on with if she wants to start today. She can study those videos to begin with. She can also do the Schofield and Sims mental arithmetic test 1 and test 2. And what I will be doing is preparing a, if you like, a checklist of work that she needs to do prior to the next live lesson, which would be presumably next Saturday. And so you can use that list, and your daughter also can use that list to plan the work over the week, and
Sorry,
then use it as a
the
tick
list
off.
that you just gave me, this is the Schofield and Sims maths and 1 and 2, the videos. And sorry, what was the rest of the list?
Well, so far you haven't got the list.
Okay.
I'll be putting the list up online so that you can access it via your login. And this will be a weekly thing. So
Okay.
I call it the parents' answers because it contains the answers for the Schofield and Sims that we just mentioned, because the
Okay.
answers for that are not in the book.
I see.
So I provide those in the parents' answers. She also needs to complete the exercises that she was given for session 1. So there's one, I think it's called Football Mad or Football Focus. There's another one which was Positive Attitude. She has to make words out of that, letters in that phrase. And then there was one which was multiplying numbers by 10, 20, and 40. So there was a maths worksheet for her to do. So she should complete those exercises. She should complete the Schofield and Sims mental arithmetic, and she should study the videos. And the answers for marking the exercises and for marking the Schofield and Sims maths will be online, but they're not there yet. So
Okay.
I will put the answers online together with a checklist of everything that she needs to do prior to live lesson 2. So it isn't there yet, but these things she can be going on with for now.
Okay. And the other thing is, when do I need to go to the Slough Consortium and sign up for the 11 plus now for the test? I
Not
haven't
now.
done it.
The bookings, or rather the registration for that usually opens on the 1st of May. So it's a long way to go. There's nothing you can do with registrations or anything until the summer term. So until then, there's really nothing to do. I mean, of course, you can be looking at information about the schools just to get a little bit of an idea which schools might be convenient, which ones might be suitable for your daughter, and so on. There's nothing to stop you from doing information gathering. But as for actions for registration and so, there's nothing to be done until the summer term. And what I do as part of the program is I keep an eye on announcements from the schools, and from the new year, I issue monthly newsletters or emails which tell you, oh, these deadlines and these dates or these events are coming up. So that's anything to do with opening of registrations for the exams, the open evenings, and closing dates for registration, and the dates of the tests themselves. So I put together all those crucial dates and send them to you so you don't miss out on any deadlines. But there is no action for you to take until the summer term of next year.
Okay. And then you mentioned that it's useful to apply to other schools. So are there any other schools in sort of outside of the Slough area, Reading maybe, that we could apply for 11 plus there? And do they have earlier sittings?
There is nothing to stop your daughter from sitting the test. You mentioned Reading, so there's Kendrick, the girls' school in Reading, and then there's Reading Boys, or Reading School, they call it, which is for the boys. But in fact, the schools in Reading use the exact same paper as the schools in Slough. So if your daughter wants to be considered for Kendrick in Reading, she doesn't actually get to sit a separate exam for it. It does come down to how well she did in her sitting of the Slough exam. So that isn't actually sitting a separate exam, because
Okay.
Reading and Kendrick use the same paper and they use the same performance. So in fact, that's just one bite of the cherry. I would recommend, though, that she sits the Buckinghamshire test, because that's a stone's throw from Slough, and there is some chance she might get in an offer from perhaps Burnham, because Burnham is right on the edge of Buckinghamshire, and
Yes.
they do take children from Slough. So at least those two. There are others further afield. You see, what happens these days is that the admissions policies of schools used to be simple, and now they're complex. When I started doing this in 2001, all the grammar schools in Slough, that is the 4 of them, Upton Court, Herschel, Langley, and St. Bernard's Catholic Grammar School. All of them, none of them had a catchment area. It didn't matter where you lived. If your child got a good enough score, they were in. They would get an offer. It was simple like that. But over the years, what's happened is they've refined their admissions policies, and they've brought in a mixture of, if you live at certain distance from the school, then they can get a place with 111, and then we'll reserve this many places for children who are outside of that area, but they can get in on their score, and so on. What I'm really saying is they review their admissions policies annually, and schools which perhaps living in Slough, your daughter may be eligible for under current admissions policies, by the time she comes to sit, she may no longer be eligible. Like, look at Langley, for example. Langley used to have no admissions policy. Now it's completely on postcode. If you don't live in certain postcode areas, you've got zero chance of getting a place at Langley.
That's the one I want.
Yeah, but you probably are in the postcodes because you live in Slough.
I actually live in Langley. I don't. I live very close to Foxborough School, so I don't know whether I'm in the catchment area or not.
Well, you know, you can find that in their admissions policy on their website, but you have to remember that by the time that your daughter does the 11 plus, the Langley Grammar School will have reviewed their admissions policies one more time. And the schools all publish their admissions policy by law by the end of April. They actually begin to publish them from January, but they don't have to publish them until the end of April. So it could be as late as the end of April before you know the admissions policy for Langley, the one that applies for 2022 entry, because for your daughter, it will be September 2022 entry. And that policy won't be finalized until spring term, possibly as late as April. But there's every chance that you are in catchment. But I can't sort of anticipate what their new admissions policy might be. Generally speaking, because more and more people are sitting the 11 plus, then the grammar schools themselves are getting more and more restrictive about what areas you have to live in. That's the trend. That's what the trend has been. Yes,
sorry to interrupt you. With the Langley Grammar, I've heard that as well as the 11 plus, it has a separate requirement to get to, you know, for admission. Is this true? That
I'm not familiar with their admissions policy now because they're also complicated. I was familiar with them when they used to be simple, but there's change from year to year, and every school has different policies, and I just don't keep track of it. But I think that they do also have a factor in some musical ability or something like that. You'd have to look at the detailed admissions policies because they all have various criteria. You know, some schools, for example, they do give priority to children of staff, and they all give priority to children that are in care and such. So if you look at the admissions policies, they address such things. And I do believe that Langley has some allowance for children with musical aptitude. And of course, in response to that, lots of children suddenly started learning instruments because of that. But don't rely on my memory of it because it's not my department. Yeah, the admissions policies are not my department, but they are complex and they are changeable. That's the point. So, you know, you could make decisions based upon the current admissions policies, but the current ones are not the ones that apply to you.
Yes, I understand. I have a question about your creative writing course. So,
do you mind if I just have a look whether anybody else has got their hand up? Because I'm conscious that, okay, they haven't. So you can fill your boots. Go ahead.
No, by all means, I realize I'm taking your time. So,
quite all right.
Okay, so the creative writing course, you said it is in addition to this course. When could I put her in for that? Because I just think that's a great thing to do generally. Right. But at the same time, I don't want to overload her. That's one question. Second question is it available as a standalone course for people who are not doing the 11 plus course, or only for people who are doing the 11 plus course?
Well, first, the creative writing course, I do it during school holidays. So it doesn't overlap with the regular weekly lessons, because the creative writing does require quite a lot of effort on the children as well as attendance. And this year I did one in April, just after lockdown. And we did it by Zoom and it worked fantastically well. I actually prefer doing it via Zoom. And I did another one at the late July, early August. And then I'm doing another one just before the Tiffin Stage 2 test this year, which is actually Tiffin boosted. So I do make creative writing available during school holidays, probably about 3 times during the year. And the bookings for them generally open up just a few weeks before the course itself. So for example, if I run one again in April, which is likely, then I would open up booking sometime in the spring term for that. So there is no action you can take currently, but for everybody who has a child on the program, you would get emails keeping you informed. So just keep an eye out for an email that mentions creative writing and creative writing bookings. And then when you get that email, it will give you all the details and booking instructions. So that's first thing. The second thing you asked was, can it be done as a standalone course? Usually there are so many children on the course who want to do it that I cannot cater for children from outside the program. The children who are on the 11 plus program get priority. I mean, that seems a must for me because it's my duty to them. So children who are on the 11 plus program get priority. But if there are places available, I would then allow somebody to do it as a standalone course. The group limit is 9, because I do it by Zoom, and I've been doing it via Zoom this year, and it's worked very well with 9, and I really wouldn't want to exceed that. So if there's a space on the program and someone who's not on the program wants to do it, I would allow it under those circumstances. Okay. By the way, thank you very much for your comment about your daughter enjoying the Zoom lessons so much. I'm going to now.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Nawan. I'm going to mute you.
Okay, laugh.
Now, I would like to say a follow-on comment from what Mrs. Awan said about her daughter enjoying the live lesson so much. The concern that Mrs. Awan expressed that, oh, she's sitting at home, she's going to get bored and she's not going to focus, was the same concern I had when lockdown occurred in late March. When lockdown occurred, no more venues, and suddenly we couldn't run those lessons. So we very quickly switched over to Zoom and posted the worksheets and books to the children so they could do the lesson via Zoom. And I was concerned at that time, how will I maintain control? How will the children be able to concentrate? They just walk away anytime. They're in their own home, sitting at their own computer. How will I be able to have the engagement that is so necessary for effective learning, the interaction? But actually all those concerns were needless, because in the event it turned out to be such a pleasant surprise just how engaged the children are when they're sitting at their computer at home, because they're still seeing everybody, they're still having a great interaction, and it is a small group. So, and you know, everything is the same. It's the same work, the same learning, and the same, not quite identical interaction, because it is different when you're in a room with a person, but it's as close as you can get, and it's very effective. And I have found that for the majority of children, they have no difficulty maintaining their focus and their engagement throughout the lesson. And there is a 10-minute break, but that's the same as in a classroom, and that does help. There are a few children who have a tendency to lose focus and concentration or be fidgety, but that too is the same as being in a classroom. those children have the same difficulty there. I can do a little bit to help them in the classroom by seating them directly in front of me so I can keep more of an eye, and getting them to clear their desk so there's less for them to fiddle with and so on. I can't quite do those things via Zoom, but I think it's a very effective way of learning, and it does have other pros that I mentioned during the presentation. Okay, so if anybody else has a question, please raise your hand. Right, I'm not seeing any hands. I hope you have found this useful. Please, if you have any questions or queries you'd rather not share in this forum, and this is a public forum, if you have anything you'd like to discuss in an individual Zoom consultation, just call the support team and arrange it. Every week I have some consultations, so I'd be very pleased to speak with you and to meet you. If you do have a child on the course, please remember, you're not on your own, they're not on their own. We do all that we can. We try to share all the expertise that we have in order that you can feel confident that you're doing the right things for your child, because they absolutely need your support at home, and you need to feel that the things you're doing are not undermining your child and they're supporting your child. That's a big part of preparing children for 11+. That's what today was all about. Thank you very much for attending. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.